So pretty much the 2025 NFL offseason is in the books. Maybe we're going to see one or two late moves as there's still some solid free agents out there, but pretty much a lot of these teams have made their final moves of the offseason after the draft. So I wanted to put a grade on every NFL team's 2025 offseason. So we're going to take into account their 2025 draft classes. We're going to take into account who they signed in free agency and also who they lost in free agency as well. See if they got better or if they got worse. So yeah, we're going to throw every team into these tiers basically. And we'll start off with the Buffalo Bills, who were very active before the offseason even started. They gave Josh Allen a new 6-year deal worth $330 million, so he's not going anywhere for a long time. They also re-signed Gregory Rousseau as well. Terrell Bernard got a 4-year extension, same with Christian Benford. So they brought back their guys. There was a reunion with Tre'Davious White. They brought in Joey Bosa on a 1-year deal. I didn't even mention they re-signed Khalil Shakir. They brought in Josh Palmer on a 3-year deal. And I thought their draft was okay. I mean, Maxwell Harrison at number 30, I thought there was some better corners on the board. I would have preferred Trey Amos over him, but I love them getting a big body there on the defensive line. Larry Ogunjobi is going to be suspended to start off the year, so they get a massive body in TJ Sanders, who's up there in the defensive tackle rankings. I really like Landon Jackson in the 3rd round as well, and they really addressed defense for most of the part, which is, I think, what they needed to do. They had one of the best offenses in the NFL last year, so I didn't really think that they needed to add a ton, and you know what? They bring in a guy like Josh Palmer. As long as they can work out an extension with James Cook, I think they're going to be in good hands. And they just got to make sure that defense can stop Patrick Mahomes, or at least stop him once in the playoffs so they could finally go to the Super Bowl. I think I may change some of these names at the end of it, and I also may drop some guys as well. I'm debating between putting the Bills in a B tier or an A tier offseason, because I think a lot of their departures, they're really not going to miss too much, as well as just extending your guys, drafting a lot of defensive players, and even bringing in Bosa and Josh Palmer with their cap restraints as well. So I think the Bills got better this offseason for sure, especially what happened last offseason where people may have given it a C or a D. I'm going to give them an A offseason. I don't know if I'm going to be as kind to the Miami Dolphins. So they lost Raheem Mostert to the Raiders, but that's fine because you have Devon Achane, you have Jalen Wright. They did lose Teron Armstead, their best offensive lineman, to retirement. They lost some other guys on the defensive side of the ball, most notably Javon Holland, who signed with the New York Giants. We also don't know what's going on with Jalen Ramsey right now, if he's going to be back next year, if he's going to be traded or let go. I do like the addition of James Daniels, but they brought in a lot of depth guys this offseason. Maybe guys that can outperform on their deals, but I am worried about this defense next year, as well as the offensive line. I think Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is actually a really good pickup for them behind Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I don't love Zach Wilson as your backup quarterback for a team that also just, man, like they have so many injury concerns with Tua, especially if he gets a concussion. How long could he be out for this year? And I think, could have gone a better veteran backup quarterback behind Tua. They draft Kenneth Grant at 13th overall after losing Christian Wilkins to the Raiders last offseason. They needed to address that position, and they also got Jordan Phillips in the 5th round. They didn't have a lot of draft picks, but did draft interior offensive line. They got Ollie Gordon late and Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers. Honestly, I do think this Dolphins offseason as a whole is going to be one of the worst ones. I think they're a D tier. I think they're a team that was so close to being one of the better teams in the AFC a few years ago, but it feels like they're going back and back since, because guys are getting more expensive. They haven't had as much flexibility, nor that many draft picks to add to this team. I think they're still going to be a good team next year, and I think they could definitely be a playoff team, but just in this offseason, in a vacuum, I think it's one of the worst ones here, especially in the AFC. All right, now let's talk about the New England Patriots, who I think killed the NFL draft. Will Campbell, 4th overall. Yes, you got to protect Drake May, and after his speech after getting drafted, that just hyped me up even more. Trayvon Henderson, early in the 6th round, or in the 2nd round, love that. Getting Kyle Williams, I thought Jared Wilson was really good value, probably the best center in this draft, and you got him there in the 3rd round. Braden Swinson, an absolute steal later in this draft. They added a ton of guys in free agency because they had a ton of cap space. I also want to take into account them getting Mike Vrabel this offseason. I think that's a big W for them. They bring in Stephon Diggs, Matt Collins, Joshua Dobbs, Austin Hooper, Morgan Moses, Garrett Bradbury, Harold Landry on a massive deal, Milton Williams on an even bigger deal, and they also bring in Carlton Davis, and they didn't really lose a ton of talent either. Yeah, they lost some notable guys there, Jonathan Jones, Jacoby Brissett, but not a lot of guys that they're going to lose sleep over. So I do think the New England Patriots had an A+ offseason. Now, they had a lot more flexibility and opportunity because they were picking high in each round, because they had a ton of cap space and they didn't have a lot of good players that were demanding money, that were upcoming free agents like maybe the Bills or the Dolphins did. But if we're just looking at the offseason in a vacuum, and that's what this video is, the Pats definitely had one of the best offseasons, and they didn't win a lot of games last year. I don't think they're going to win a ton of games in 2025, but they could definitely double their win total. Next up, we have the New York Jets, who kind of ended an era of the Aaron Rodgers tenure for 2 years. That was pretty much 1 full year and an absolute disaster. They traded for Devontae Adams, who they just ended up cutting a couple months later, and they gave up a day 2 pick. Tyron Smith retired. They lost Morgan Moses to the Patriots. They lost DJ Reed to the Lions, and Hassan Reddick, who barely played for them, to the Bucks. Javon Kinlaw actually surprisingly got paid a decent amount of money by the Commanders, but the Jets were also active somewhat in free agency, re-signing Jamian Sherwood to a 3-year deal. They bring in Brandon Stevens on a 3-year deal. Andre Cisco got a 1-year deal, and most notably, they brought in Justin Fields on a 2-year deal with $30 million fully guaranteed. They also signed Aaron Glenn to be their new head coach. I love them drafting Armand Membu with the 7th overall pick. I love them getting Mason Taylor and Azariah Thomas on day 2. I thought they killed that there. And I think taking a flyer on Malachi Moore was well worth it. I don't think the Jets had one of the best off seasons, and you could look at this roster and say it got worse with some of the departures. I think it was okay. I'm going to put them in C tier. They do have a chance to move up to B tier. I mean, I'm more excited about Justin Fields than Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback going forward. I'm not going to say that he's a better quarterback. I also don't know what's going on with Breece Hall in that backfield. They didn't really add a good wide receiver 2 next to Garrett Wilson, but I am excited that this offensive line is kind of complete with Fashanu, Membu, and all the guys on the interior like Vera Tucker, Simpson, and Tippmann. Next up, we have the Baltimore Ravens, another really good team like the Buffalo Bills that had to lose some talent because they couldn't afford to bring back everybody. They lose Josh Johnson. Brandon Stevens was probably the most notable one. Deontay Johnson is now doing the AFC North tier or tour, just signed with the Browns. They bring in Cooper Rush. Like, that's a quarterback I thought Miami should have brought in. That is a really good backup quarterback. They bring in DeAndre Hopkins. The Ravens are kind of like the Titans light when it comes to veteran receivers having like one last go at things. But them being able to re-sign Ronnie Stanley was huge for them to kind of complete that offensive line. And their draft, man, like Malachi Starks at 27. I just think he should have gone 10 picks higher than that. Mike Green at like the 27th pick in the second round. There's a reason why he fell. Like, we thought he could go as high as 8 to the Carolina Panthers, but he's got some serious charges off the field. So I don't really want to give them props for that. Now, if he's cleared for those and he was innocent all along, then I will give them props, but we don't really know. They bring in Emory Jones, I thought was a good offensive tackle Ed from LSU, and they brought in Lejante Wester, who played with Travis Hunter and Shador Sanders over there in Colorado. I think for the Ravens, they also didn't have a lot of like flexibility this offseason and opportunity like the Patriots did. I don't think it was as good as Buffalo, but I honestly think it's a fine offseason. Maybe a better receiver than DeAndre Hopkins would have been nice, but them getting Malachi Starks in the first round, then bringing back Ronnie Stanley, and you got your running back 1 in Derrick Henry, like you're still going to have a high-powered offense, and the defense got even better. This could be the best secondary in the NFL next year with Starks, Washington, Hamilton, Nate Wiggins year 2, Marlon Humphrey. Like, that's a really good secondary. The Cincinnati Bengals this offseason still have something looming over them. What's going on with Trey Hendrickson? Are they going to extend him? Are they going to trade him? I think an extension will happen, but that's still TBD. They lost Alex Kappa, Trent Brown, and Sam Hubbard. Hubbard for retirement. Kappa goes to the Raiders, which is going to be a notable loss for them on that interior. But they were a little bit active, more so in bringing their guys back. Jamar Chase got paid. T. Higgins got paid. Mike Gesicki got paid as well. I don't really love a lot of the defensive ads. I mean, BJ Hill coming back on a 3-year extension is fine. TJ Sladen on a 2-year deal. And I also didn't really love the Bengals draft either. I think there's a lot of boomer bust potential with Shamar Stewart. And I don't know if that's what the Bengals needed to take a chance on. I think I would have liked it a little bit more if they took a safer defensive prospect there at 17. I do like them getting Demetrius Knight there in the second round. I think Dylan Fairchild's a good interior offensive lineman there in the third. But for the Bengals, do I really think they got better this offseason? I don't think so, honestly. Like, they brought back their core, their high-powered offense, and that defense, yeah, it got better, but you were able to add guys. And if they lose Trey Hendrickson, I'm not really sure how I feel about that team. Now, they're going to be a top offense in the league yet again next year. I'd rather be the Bengals than a ton of teams because you have a top quarterback in the league and probably the best wide receiver duo and maybe the best wide receiver in the league in Jamar Chase. I just still can't trust this offensive line, and I can't trust the defense. I don't think it was a great offseason for the Bengals in terms of getting better, but maybe Shamar Stewart will prove me wrong. Now let's talk about the Cleveland Browns, who made a big, probably the biggest draft night trade, moving down from 2 to 5, passing up on Travis Hunter to get Mason Graham and some other draft capital as well. Carson Schwarzenegger there with pick 33. Love Keyshawn Judkins in the second round. Harold Fannin with David Njoku being around 30 years old. They had him in the third. Dylan Gabriel was probably like, I don't know if I want to say the worst pick in the draft, but definitely one of the biggest head scratchers because you take Dylan Sampson in the 4th round. I like Sampson and Judkins as your new running back duo, and it's a new era there. But Shador Sanders in the 5th, in terms of value, that's a steal. But this QB room's kind of comical. It's Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson, Shador Sanders, and Dylan Gabriel. You're probably not going to cut Dylan Gabriel. You just drafted him in the 3rd. I don't think they're going to cut Shador Sanders. Maybe Kenny Pickett gets cut. You're not cutting Joe Flacco. I don't know if they could take the financial hit to cut Deshaun Watson it's going to be really intriguing to see what happens. So yeah, we know that they brought back Joe Flacco. They acquired Kenny Pickett in a trade. They brought in, Deontay Johnson recently. They gave Myles Garrett basically $40 million a year, made him the highest paid defensive player of all time. And they also had a bunch of departures as well. I would say like the most notable ones being like Jameis Winston, who signed with the Giants. It looks like Nick Chubb isn't going to be back for this team next year. Yeah, man, it's a really head-scratching offseason for the Browns. I just don't know if I love their draft, and I just don't know what they're going to look like next year. Now, getting Mason Graham is huge. Schwarzenegger's a really good pick. I'm excited about the run game. They didn't really address offensive line a ton, which I think they probably should have. But the weapons are going to be fine next year. Like Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Harold Fannin, David Njoku. I just also don't love their quarterback play. I think I may throw them in that D tier. I think they should have traded away Myles Garrett, hit the reset button a little bit. I don't think the Travis Hunter trade is going to hurt them in the long run. And who knows if the Jaguars are going to be bad next year. I just don't think they had one of the better off seasons compared to some of the teams we've talked about. The Pittsburgh Steelers were also very active. Now, they lost all of their quarterbacks, Kyle Allen to the Lions, Justin Fields to the Jets, and Russell Wilson to the Giants. I wanted them to bring back Justin Fields. I wouldn't have hated Russell Wilson because right now the Steelers don't have a quarterback. They drafted Will Howard. I guess they think they're getting Aaron Rodgers, or maybe there's a plan B Kirk Cousins thing in there. They lose Najee Harris to the Chargers. Bunch of like veteran receivers leaves, which is fine. I think the biggest losses are going to be James Daniels on the interior. That is going to hurt. And they also lost to Landon Roberts to the Raiders. Even Larry Ogunjobi to the Bills, but they're going to be fine. They did address interior defensive line. They bring in DK Metcalf. They get a wide receiver 1. They didn't trade George Pickens. He's a wide receiver 2. They brought back Mason Rudolph, signed Kenneth Gainwell, brought in some veteran receivers and brought back a couple. I would say they didn't really make any big splashes on defense outside of getting a 34-year-old Darius Slay. And I thought the draft was fine for the Steelers. Like, if you didn't have a high grade on any of the quarterbacks, don't draft one, right? If they don't have a first-round grade on Shedeur, don't draft him. I would have preferred Jalen Milroe over Will Howard, but they took Will Howard 3 rounds later. I like the Steelers draft in terms of talent. Like, you address defensive line a ton with Black and Harmon. That's going to be one of the best defensive line units in the league. You add Jack Sawyer for some depth because TJ Watt, TBD in the future, but Highsmith, a little bit of injury prone over the last 2 years. And then, yeah, I think getting Caleb Johnson is going to be nice for them. I don't really love them not addressing corner this offseason. This is going to be one of the worst secondaries yet again. I'm going to throw them in C tier. It's just still TBD on quarterback, but like if they don't get Aaron Rodgers and it's like Will Howard, I may have to bump them down to F. I don't know if I want to actually put the Steelers in D tier. Like maybe I'm going to bump them up if I think I can get another team in C tier because I do think I like their offseason more than the Browns, Bengals, and Dolphins, but they just don't have a quarterback right now, and the secondary is going to be awful. I like them getting DK Metcalf. I like their draft overall, but I don't know if the Steelers had really a great offseason, to be honest with you, and that's coming from a Steelers fan. Next up, we have the Houston Texans, to kind of a shocker. They drafted both Iowa State receivers in the draft. They did take Ariante Ursary in the second round, which is nice, and they took a lot of offensive players in this draft, even Graham Mertz there later on. They did bring in some receivers as well in the offseason, like Watson, Kirk, and Braxton Berrios. They brought in Cam Robinson, which they desperately needed after trading away Larry Tunsil, which is a little bit shocking. A lot of depth pieces on the defensive line. They reworked Daniel Hunter's contract, and they made Derek Stingley one of the highest paid corners, I believe the highest paid corner in the NFL. They traded for CJ Gardner-Johnson, basically giving up on Kenyon Green, realizing he was a bust for them. And here were their departures: Stephon Diggs, trading away Larry Tunsil. And I don't really know if the Texans got that much better this offseason. I think I may just drop them in C. There's a chance I just want to put them in D tier because I'm really scared about this offensive line. Like, they didn't have a great offensive line last year, and they traded away Larry Tunsil, their best offensive lineman. I mean, there's the receiving room, like, some guys are going to pan out for sure. So it's going to work out for them. Maybe I'll throw them in C tier with the Jets because at least they probably should be better next year. I think I'm just, like, so high on CJ Stroud, still having a bounce back year after a sophomore slump. For the Indianapolis Colts, I mean, they signed Daniel Jones, which is a good backup to Anthony Richardson, a little bit more exciting than having probably Joe Flacco there. They did lose a bunch of guys on the offensive line, like Will Fries, and Ryan Kelly. Ayo Dengbo, they lost to the Bears, but Chavarius Ward was their big signing, as well as Cameron Bynum. So the secondary did get better. And the draft, like, I like Tyler Warren there at 14. I mean, there's no excuses for Anthony Richardson in this offense. I thought some, like, hit or miss picks later on. They took Riley Leonard there in the 6th round. Man, like, I don't know if I love their offseason either. I think I may throw it in C tier. Like, I love them getting Warren at 14. I thought that was really good value. I like their secondary next year. I wonder how this offensive line is going to look for Anthony Richardson. We'll see. Like, I don't know, like, if they're, like, the offense was that, or the offseason was that much better than the Steelers offseason, if we're being honest. So, like, maybe I'm going to bump up the Steelers into this tier. Part of me wants to even drop down the Texans a tier, which I may end up doing so. Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars with a new head coach in Liam Cohen, a new GM in James Gladstone, made a lot of moves. They traded Christian Kirk to a division rival. They cut Evan Ingram. They lost some offensive linemen this offseason and some secondary members. Now, they also signed Nick Mullins to be the backup. De'Ami Brown got $10 million. And they signed Jordan Lewis, a slot corner, for $30 million a year. I thought they had, like, one of the more head-scratching free agency periods. And their draft was definitely fun, so they basically gave up on their first rounder next year and their second this year, but they get Travis Hunter, who I love, and he was my number one player in this draft class, and he's somebody that could be a top 20 corner and a top 20 receiver. I don't think we realize how much value that could really provide you. I like Tuden in the fourth and Wyatt Millam in the third. I thought that was really good value for those guys, but I don't know if the Jaguars really had a great offseason as a whole. I think I'm going to drop them to D tier, honestly. Like, the only player that I think moves me they added this offseason was my best player in the draft in Travis Hunter, but I thought there was a lot of risk to that. But maybe I'll bump them up because I do like the hiring of Liam Cohen, and like, it should be more exciting around Trevor Lawrence next year. I don't know if this team really got that much better, though. Maybe I'm going to leave them in D tier. And lastly, we got the Tennessee Titans here in the AFC South. They had a ton of departures. Obviously, not a lot of guys they wanted to bring back. Given how bad they were last year, they gave Dan Moore a lot of money. Probably one of my least favorite deals in free agency. Tail as old as time. The Titans signing maybe a wash receiver. They bring in Tyler Lockett. And they didn't really make big defensive splashes, I would say, relative to previous years for them. They get the best quarterback in the draft, and hopefully their franchise guy in Cam Ward. I mean, I don't know how I feel about some of the other picks. Like, I think Ao Maynard in the fourth's nice. Kevin Winston in the third's nice. But with all things considered this offseason, I think the Titans offseason could have probably been better. I think, like, them getting Cam Ward to C, but, like, that was the easiest pick in the world. They didn't have to hope anything happened before them. They had the number one pick. I don't know if they really got better this offseason. Like, they may have gotten worse. Now, I feel like I can't have this many teams in D tier. Maybe I'm going to bump up, oh, man, Cleveland or Miami. Maybe I bump up Cleveland a little bit. Or Jacksonville, because I don't know if I want to have any teams in F, but if I was going to drop some teams down to F, like, maybe I drop the Bengals down with all things considered. I don't know. I think I'm going to rework this tier as we go along. And next up for the Denver Broncos here, I really like this offseason. So you bring back Jared Stidham. We know that Zach Wilson ends up going to the Dolphins. They bring in Evan Ingram. Love that. But I love what they did on the defensive side of the field. They bring in Dre Greenlaw, who may be banked up to start off the year, but I think is going to be fine. Talanoa Hufanga, I thought was a great add to that secondary, which got so much better this offseason. Like, Cody Barton, may miss him a little bit, but you're not going to really miss any of these guys. Maybe Riley Dixon, your punter. You didn't really need Jahdae Barron at 20, so a little bit of a questionable fit, but him, Riley Moss, and then Hufanga, Jones, and obviously the Depoy Patrick Surtain, that's probably the best secondary in the league. I think it's them and the Ravens next year. RJ Harvey in the second, I think, is a great pickup for them. He could be their bell cow next year. The rest of the draft was fine. I don't think anything too special, but I would say that the Broncos had a productive offseason. I don't think it's one of the best offseasons, but I'm going to throw it in the B tier with the Baltimore Ravens. Next up, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. They draft Josh Simmons in the first round and Omar Norman Mott in the second round. I thought those were one of the best two picks they could possibly take. Norman Watt next to Chris Jones and learning from him is going to be fantastic, and Simmons is such a big add for that offensive line going forward. I would have liked if they maybe drafted a couple more depth guys. Jalen Royals, though, I thought was good value there in the fourth, and Brashard Smith, we'll see if it could be anything in the seventh. Their last seventh round running back worked out in Pacheco. Here in free agency, a lot of like minor moves, I would say, but they bring back Juju Smith-Schuster, bring back Hollywood Brown, Elijah Mitchell, Kareem Hunter, all back. Some good backup quarterbacks in Bailey Zappi and Gardner Minshew. For backups, they tag Trey Smith, but they trade away Joe Thuney. They re-signed a couple of their guys like Nick Bolton. They bring Christian Fulton, and they also brought in Jalen Moore, which I think has some risk to it, being a backup in the past. I think the Chiefs offseason was fine, but I think with all things considered, like, they're the best team in the AFC. They were the second best team in the NFL last year. It's probably a B offseason. Like, they addressed the offensive line, their biggest need. I don't think they needed to overpay on a running back. Like, I didn't want them to draft a running back in round one. Yeah, it's going to, I think, suck losing Joe Thuney a little bit because how much Jawan Taylor has financially restrict you. But with their limited financial flexibility and their low draft capital being at the end of every round, thought it was pretty good. So the Vegas Raiders were very active this offseason. Ashton Jeanty at the 6th overall pick. Very exciting selection. We'll see how the offensive line is going to be for him next year. Jack Besh in the second round, Darian Porter in the third round. I thought that was a pretty good start to this year's draft. They trade and then extend Geno Smith Very notable, going to be their best quarterback in quite some time. They bring in Pete Carroll, bring in John Spytek. Tom Brady's a part-time owner now. Chip Kelly's the OC. I like them bringing in Alex Kappa. They re-signed Max Crosby. I said how much I thought the Steelers are going to miss Landon Roberts. They pick him up. Jeremy Chin is there now. They did have some departures as well. Actually a bunch of departures, but nothing too special. I would say like most notable guys like Nate Hobbs, Robert Spillane. But I do think the Raiders are a much more exciting team. I don't know if I want to throw them in A. I think I'm going to throw them in B tier right now because we'll see how good Jack Bech could be as the wide receiver 2 for this team moving forward. And I am worried a little bit about that secondary and the offensive line. Now, the Chargers drafted Amari Hampton with the 22nd pick. I don't know if I love that for them, but you know what? Hampton and Najee is going to be a fun running back duo. I think Trey Harris in the second round is really good. There's a reason why Jackson Dart was good last year, and I think Trey Harris is going to be a big reason why. The Chargers in free agency were pretty active. Like, they cut and brought back Khalil Mack. They lost Joey Bosa to the Buffalo Bills, brought in some depth corner pieces. They brought in Mekhi Becton. I really like that ad for them. But they're going to have some guys that left that they may miss. Gus Edwards, probably not as much. J.K. Dobbins could still be back next year. They're definitely going to miss Poona Ford as well. I don't know, though. I think the Chargers did get better this offseason. I think I'm going to throw them in B tier. I don't know if I want to throw them in A tier, like the Bills. I don't know. I feel like maybe some of these teams deserve better credit for their offseason. Maybe I'm going to bump up the Ravens, but I don't know. I would have liked if they added maybe another offensive weapon to that team, but maybe they didn't really need one because you still have likely they didn't trade away Mark Andrews. I'm trying to figure out who I think had the best offseason. It's funny because I have all 4 AFC West teams here in the B spot. I think I may bump up the Denver Broncos. And I think with all things considered internally and externally, I'm actually going to put the Raiders in A. Like I said, still questionable of a secondary and an offensive line, but I think just like from personnel to players, I thought it was a productive offseason for Las Vegas. Now for the Dallas Cowboys, an active offseason for them. They traded for Joe Milton because Trey Lance and Cooper Rush no longer on this team. The running backs next year are going to be Miles Sanders, Javonte Williams, and Jaden Blue, basically. Don't know how I feel about that, honestly. They draft Tyler Booker. I actually like their draft at the top. Like Booker, Ezeraku, and Revel, I thought were all great ads and big positions in need. And I think in terms of Revel and Ezeraku, you got them way lower than where they probably should have went in this draft. They also re-signed Osa Odigizua. They acquired Kenneth Murray in a trade and Kyrie Elam, who really wasn't great last year, hasn't been great in his career. They brought in former first-round pick Peyton Turner. You know, he's not really a great player either. And they did lose some people this offseason as well, most notably Zach Martin to retirement. DeMarcus Lawrence is on the Seahawks now. And they lost Jordan Lewis to the Jaguars. We mentioned that earlier. And then also Rico Dowdle, their best running back last year, went to Carolina. I would have liked if they got a better receiver this offseason. I know they wanted Ted McMillan there at number 12. It might be a D tier offseason though for the Cowboys. Like, how much better did they really get? Maybe their draft class is going to put them up in C tier because I think everything leading up to the draft wasn't great. I know it's like the least important position, but running back still has so many question marks. But I think getting Savon Revel, Ezeraku, and Booker would like kind of saved the offseason for them because I also didn't love the Brian Schottenheimer hiring. So the New York Giants, great draft, honestly. I'm a little skeptical about Jackson Dart, and I don't think I like that trade up, even though they didn't give up a lot. I just don't think I like Jackson Dart in the first round. But Abdul Carter, Darius Alexander, Cam Scatabo, phenomenal draft. Phenomenal draft for the New York Giants with all things considered. I like Russell Wilson. I mean, he's going to help you win games. He's a serviceable quarterback. He's a good quarterback. Is he a great quarterback? No. Is he a top 10 quarterback? No. Is he a top 18 quarterback? Yeah, he could play like that for you, and he's going to have probably maybe a worse offensive line in New York, but he's going to have a better run game. We'll see. I guess like O-line not as good, but running back should be equally as good or better. He's going to have a better receiver in Malik Neighbors. We'll see. Probably a better offensive-minded head coach in Brian Daboll than Mike Tomlin. And they bring in Jameis Winston in free agency. A lot of money went around. Like Javon Holland got paid. Paulson Adebo got paid. Adding them to Drew Phillips. Like that should be a pretty good secondary with Tyler Nubin as well. Like I said, like the offensive line I have question marks on, but I do think the Giants had a pretty good offseason. Maybe it would have been better to fire Daboll and Shane, but they got another shot. I do think the Giants got better, and they could be a fringe wildcard team next year. They could definitely be like in that hunt graphic like week 14. Man, the Philadelphia Eagles, I thought killed the draft. I think Jahad Campbell in the first round, Andrew Makuba in the second round were phenomenal picks, kind of like what I mentioned before with the Kansas City Chiefs. Kyle McCord above like Will Howard or just drafting him, I thought was a little bit of a head scratcher, but they're a team that just won the Super Bowl, so you tend to lose a lot of guys, and I think they replaced them very well. So they re-signed Saquon Barkley. You go from Kenny Pickett to Dorian Thompson-Robinson. You take a flyer on A.J. Dillon and Terrace Marshall, but yeah, Lane Johnson on an extension. You're taking a flyer on Kenyon Green, but you bring back Zach Bond. You bring in Adoree Jackson. I think it's fine to lose Slay and Gardner Johnson. I think the young guys can kind of step up because they did lose a bunch of guys, and Josh Sweat to the Cardinals and Milton Williams to the Patriots. All things considered, though, I thought the Eagles had a pretty good offseason. I may throw them an A. Just bringing back, I think, Bond was huge for them. They lost Becton. It's like guys they really couldn't afford, though. I thought they did a good job in the draft. Like Campbell and Makuba in the first 2 rounds were great. And honestly, I don't think they got that much worse this offseason when we expected them to because they weren't going to be able to afford everybody. I might throw them in B. Kind of similar to the Chiefs offseason, I would say. And the Washington Commanders, I thought had a great draft. I love Josh Conway at 29. Also adding him with Laramie Tunsil this offseason. We're protecting Jaden Daniels. They didn't lose any of their coordinators. They didn't lose Cliff Kingsbury to a head coaching job. I guess for the Eagles, yeah, they lost Kellen Moore. Trey Amos in the 2nd round, I thought was a steal. I think it's a nice flyer on Jalen Wayne there in the 4th. We know that they, brought back Marcus Mariota. I think the running game could have been upgraded a little bit, but they're still bought in on Brian Robinson. The receivers, I mean, Jaden Daniels was fine last year with not a great receiving core, and they add Deebo Samuel. They brought back some guys as well. Zach Ertz signed an extension for them, but I love them getting Laramie Tunsil. I thought that was a big add, taking a flyer on some edge rushers they brought back, Bobby Wagner. Thought they paid a decent amount of money for Javon Kinlaw. I don't know if he was that good, but that still should be, it's going to be a good team. And I don't think they lost too much talent. Like, maybe Fowler and Allen are going to hurt a little bit to this team next year, but I do think the secondary got better. And I think the Commanders had an A offseason. I think it was big to protect Jaden Daniels. I think Deebo Samuel is going to be a fun gadget player for Cliff Kingsbury and has one more good year left in the tank. They didn't lose too much talent, and they were in the NFC Championship game last year. Next up, we have the Chicago Bears, who did a lot this offseason. I think a lot of good. So they really addressed the interior offensive line before the draft. They traded for Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. They signed Drew Dahlman, probably the best center on the market. They added to the defensive line with Adengbo and Grady Jarrett. They they extended Kyler Gordon. And they're not going to really miss too many guys. I mean, like some of the interior offensive lineman depth that they ended up losing. But no, I think I don't know. I don't really think you're going to miss too many guys there for the Bears. And they bring in Ben Johnson. Just love that hiring. I thought they did a great job there getting the guy for Caleb Williams. And speaking of Caleb Williams, they got him some weapons in the draft. Colston Loveland with him and Cole Kmet there at the tight end spots. Luther Burden to DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. Ozzie Trapillo, some offensive line depth there with the 24th pick in the 2nd round. Shamar Turner, the upside he has in the 2nd round. I thought Zach Frazier was a nice flyer in the 5th. To be honest with you, with Ben Johnson and all that, I think they had an A+ offseason. I know they were like the offseason Super Bowl champions last year, but I do think that they had a much better offseason this year, getting the head coach for Caleb Williams. Maybe they end up with another running back here at some point throughout the end of the offseason. They could have added another RB and maybe a more solidified tackle, because I'm sure they would have loved like Kelvin Banks or Armand Membu. But either way, or Ashton Genty, I think they had an A+ offseason. I'm very excited about the Bears in 2025. For the Detroit Lions, I didn't really love their draft. I think Tate Ratledge in the 2nd round was a good pick. I think Tyreek Williams has a little bit of a boomer bust potential there at 28. Isaac Tesla and trading just multiple future thirds for him. Definitely head scratching in that draft for sure. They were going to lose some guys, and they lost Ben Johnson and they lost Aaron Glenn, which isn't their fault, and there's really nothing you could do about that. But they brought in DJ Reed, which I think is going to be a great replacement for Carlton Davis. They took some other flyers out there, but they did lose a little bit of talent in Davis. Kevin Zeitler, they're going to feel that loss as well, but nothing honestly too major. It was just more so the coordinators. I think they had a B offseason. I don't think they got much worse. I think what's holding them back is them losing their coordinators. Maybe not the best draft in the world, but I don't think they got too much worse, like I said. For the Green Bay Packers, they draft Matthew Golden, finally drafting a wide receiver there on day 1. They took Savion Williams there in the 3rd as well. They have a deep wide receiver class. We're going to see who pans out for that team going forward for agency. They didn't do too much, but they did they gave Aaron Banks and Nate Hobbs a ton of money. And they didn't lose anybody too important, maybe Eric Stokes, but he had his ups and definitely downs last year for the Packers. I mean, I don't think they lost a lot, so I don't know if they got too much better though. The secondary still has some question marks. We'll see how the offensive line is going to be next year. I mean, I'm glad they drafted Matthew Golden. I don't know if he's going to be better than Jaden Reed, and I think they need that wide receiver 1, but I do think the passing attack, I'm still high on Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love for this team long term. They got a great running back in Josh Jacobs, and they at least have wide receiver depth. They have tight end depth. I think it might be, I just think Aaron Banks and Hobbs are risky signings. I think I may give them a C offseason, to be honest with you, just because it also doesn't help that this division is loaded. But to be honest with you, I don't know if their offseason was worse than the Lions. So it's either I drop the Lions and the Packers or I bump them up, which I'll put them in B tier for now. And then for the Minnesota Vikings, I mean, if JJ McCarthy is good, this could be a team that could win the NFC itself next year, but they need JJ McCarthy to be good. So they brought back Harrison Smith, which I don't know if is a good thing at this point in his career, but they did pay Byron Murphy. They brought him back. Javon Hargrave got paid by this team. Jonathan Allen got paid. Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, Aaron Jones got brought back, and they traded for Jordan Mason. They lost Sam Darnold to the Seahawks, Daniel Jones to the Colts. Thought they were going to bring him back. Garrett Bradbury to the Patriots, Cam Robinson to the Texans. They did lose a ton of talent this offseason. I like them getting Donovan Jackson there at 24, but I also... I don't know. I thought they maybe should have traded down because they only made 5 picks and only 2 in the first 4 rounds, basically. So I think the Vikings, though, I mean, I think they went down in quarterback from Darnold to McCarthy, but I just like them getting Fries, Kelly, Allen, Hargrave. They really built up the trenches, and I think like they had so many secondary guys in free agency. They didn't really lose too much talent over there. The secondary could still be questionable. I think quarterback still has a big question mark on how JJ McCarthy's going to be, but I do think they had an A offseason. Yeah, man, the NFC North is just going to be loaded next year. For the Atlanta Falcons, a lot of their fans in my team tier list after the draft said I was too low on them. I don't know if I'm all the way in on Michael Penix yet or this defense. And they did add to the defense kind of like more minor in free agency. They lost Grady Jarrett this offseason, which he's definitely not what he used to be. They brought back Jake Matthews, definitely their best offensive, well, probably their second best offensive lineman. And in the draft, they addressed defense, which is great. I think Xavier Watson in the 3rd round is great value. Jalen Walker at 15, I thought was a very good selection. I think there's a lot of risk to the James Pierce pick. And this team did lose. I mean, they're probably going to lose Kirk Cousins. They lost Drew Dahlman to the Bears. They lost Grady Jarrett to the Bears as well. So for the Falcons, I mean, I don't think this defense is going to be great next year. It's definitely going to be better. I think the draft was fine for them, but I think there was some risk to James Pierce. I think C tier is probably fair for them. I mean, the Panthers didn't have a lot of money to spend, which is odd for a team that's bad, but they had a lot of kind of bad contracts lined up still, but them getting Ted McMillan, I'm coming around on that pick a ton. I think that was a big position to need. Scorton and just drafting edge rushers on day 2 was great. Trevor Etienne in the 4th. I don't know if I love that pick. And then in free agency, they were going to get Milton Williams. At least we thought they were. And then he kind of switched up. He went to the Patriots, but they got Tershawn Ward in there on a pretty massive deal. They brought back J.C. Horn. I like them signing Trayvon Moore. This defense should definitely be better. And looking at their wide receiver room, I'm really glad they drafted Ted McMillan to be that wide receiver one. They also agreed to terms recently on Hunter Renfrow. I like Andy Dalton still being their backup. And I don't think they lost too much talent either going into next year. So I think the Panthers had a productive offseason. I'm going to throw it in B. And for the New Orleans Saints, I don't really know what they're doing. I mean, Kellen Moore, I think there's some risk to him being the head coach. I do like it better than some other head coach hirings, but I don't love it. I think Kelvin Banks at 9 was great and then had some question marks with a lot of the other picks, including Tyler Shuck in the 2nd round. For the Saints, here in free agency, they brought back Brendan Cooks on a reunion. They re-signed Jawan Johnson to pretty notable money. They gave Chase Young a decent amount of money. Don't really know how I feel about that either. They did lose Paulson Adebo to the Giants, Willie Gay to the Dolphins, and nothing too serious there. But to be honest with you, I think the Saints probably, I don't know if I want to throw them an F, but I might throw them an F. I'm not really big fans of the Saints offseason as a whole, but I think we're just all ready for them to not be great in 2025. And we have no idea what's going on with Derek Carr. For Tampa Bay, they brought back Chris Godwin, but them drafting Emeka Buka makes me think maybe they're just going to be a little bit patient with him next year. I like them adding Hassan Reddick in free agency as well. They did lose KJ Britt, Shoyinka, their 1st round pick. That didn't really work out for them. Nothing really too serious that they lost this offseason. And I like their draft. I like Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Harris there in the 2nd and 3rd rounds because I think they can really be good corners for them. And Benjamin Morrison, if he was healthy, could have probably been a 1st round pick. And Ibuka, I think, is going to really prove people wrong. I think it was a productive offseason for the Bucs. They didn't really lose a lot of guys. They did lose Liam Cohen, but they were fine after losing Dave Canales. I think it's probably an A offseason. The Arizona Cardinals were definitely active as well. They didn't lose really that much talent, I would say, and they paid a lot of money for Josh Sweat, and they re-signed Trey McBride on a pretty massive extension. They brought back Baron Browning and Evan Brown and those guys. And I thought they had a pretty good draft. I mean, I've really liked Walter Nolan in the 1st round and Will Johnson in the 2nd round, so I thought they did very well early on. I'm going to say it's a B offseason, though. I don't know if I want to say that it's one of the best. The Rams traded down in this draft because the Falcons traded up to take James Pierce, and they took Terrence Ferguson, the tight end out of Oregon. I'm not really sure if I love that. Now, I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but Ferguson went, did he go? He went after Mason Taylor, correct? Mason Taylor went the 10th pick in the second round, and Ferguson, yeah, maybe they could have passed the Jets, but I like Taylor a lot more than Ferguson, and they went 4 picks apart. I don't know if I would have taken Ferguson over like Fannin or Elijah Arroyo either. I like Chris Paul in the 5th. Shout out to Chris Paul Jr., being the son of the NBA GOAT point guard. And then in free agency, there was speculation that they could trade Matthew Stafford this offseason. That didn't happen. They let go of Cooper Kupp. He goes to Seattle, a division rival. They bring in Devontae Adams, which was a little bit of a shocker. They traded Jonah Jackson to the Bears. And then they also added, or they brought in, Coleman Shelton to be a center for them. And they added Poona Ford, which I thought was a really good add. I don't think they got worse this offseason. I think there were some questionable moves, but I would have liked if they had a first-round pick. I think that's what's holding them back. Honestly, I may throw it at C tier because you lost some offensive linemen. I know Jackson wasn't great for them last year. I would have liked if they drafted somebody in the first round. I know, or it's just like a better player in the second round, maybe Donovan Ezeraku, who may have actually been off the board. Nope. Oh, yeah, he was off the board 2 picks prior, but they could have easily traded up. For the San Francisco 49ers, I thought there were some better players on the board than Micah Williams. I liked Alfred Collins in the second round, and they had a ton of draft picks. So, they're probably going to get your Malik Mustafas, your Patrick Pauls, and those guys that are going to just be fine for them in the long term. But they lost a lot of talent this offseason. A lot of talent. So Mason to the Vikings, Mitchell to the Chiefs, not the end of the world. Debo to the Commanders, been there for a while. Jalen Moore, but was kind of a backup to the Chiefs. Banks, kind of a backup to the Packers, but has come in and go. Leonard Floyd to the Falcons. Siobhan Hargrave to the Vikings. Javarius Ward to the Colts. So yeah, Hufanga to the Broncos. I mean, they're not going to miss a ton of those guys, but they may miss some of them. The offensive line is going to be very questionable. The defensive line may be questionable. I like them bringing back Robert Saleh. Mac Jones is a flyer on a backup quarterback spot. Shanahan finally gets his guy. I don't know, though. I don't know if I want to put it in F. I think I'm going to put it in a D offseason. I don't think the 49ers got better. They should be healthier next year. They should definitely be good enough to compete for a playoff spot. But for this offseason as a whole, I don't think it was great. And then our last team is the Seattle Seahawks. Love their draft. Athleticism across the board. Grazeable at 18. Position of need. Nick Manwari, 3rd pick in the second round. Love that. Elijah Royal, like that a ton. And Jalen Milroe, I love them taking a flyer on Jalen Milroe. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks in this draft after Cam Ward. And they signed Sam Darnold, who probably isn't as good as Geno Smith. He was better last year, but is a lot younger. And it's not the worst deal in the world by any means. They bring in Cooper Kupp to be the wide receiver 2 next to JSN. They do trade away DK Metcalf. Lockett goes to the Titans. They bring in DeMarcus Lawrence. Jaron Reed comes back, Ernest Jones. So the defense should be better in Seattle next year. We'll see if the offensive line is going to be any bit better. It probably has to be. It was like the worst interior offensive line last year. And I think the Seahawks, I think they got better. I think it's going to be a big offseason for McDonald going forward. I like them long-term, though, going from Smith to Darnold. And I think they did well in the draft with Milroe, Arroyo, and Manwari, and Zabel to kickstart off the draft. So that is going to be my final gradings for every team in the offseason. But I feel like I got to throw some teams down in F. I kind of want to throw the Bengals just because I have higher expectations for the Bengals, right? And I don't know. They bring back Chase and Higgins, so I don't know if I want to throw them in F. Do I think the Titans? I mean, they're fine with being bad next year. It's really just optimizing Cam Ward. Maybe the Jaguars offseason, but I like Liam Cohen, so I just don't know what team I'd throw in F. Maybe it's going to be the Browns. Sorry, Browns fans. I thought the draft was a little questionable. They added talent, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they're going to be great next year, and maybe that's fine. Maybe they're gearing up to get Garrett Nussmeier with the #1 overall pick. I might throw Miami in F. Maybe Dolphins fans are going to hate that, but I just don't know if this team got better, and I wonder if their window was closed to really making a run in the playoffs, and they didn't really have any playoff success with that era, but we'll see going forward. And I think if I was going to bump up some teams, I think I may bump up the Minnesota Vikings into A+. I may bump up. I don't know who else I'm going to throw in A+, so I may just leave it as the Pats, the Bears, and the Vikings. Bunch of teams in A. B and C are going to be the most crowded tiers. There's D and there's F. You can let me know what you agree with or disagree with down below. If you did enjoy it, appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe. If you did enjoy it, appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.